Hey, you look familiar. Michelle.
Happy New Year, Stephen, and Happy New Year to everyone that's joining. I figure up to January 31st, it's still fair game to wish people Happy New
First
Year.
fire tip of the year, so of course we can say Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. Hopefully you had some
New
good
Year.
holidays. Didn't get sick like I did. Didn't get sick
Aw.
like my wife did. We had very quiet holidays, but it was okay. Wow, that picture needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it's pretty crook.
We,
Oh, yeah. I think now we're all noticing our background stuff. I've got Sochi's
we
ball.
live a quarter mile from a quarry, an enormous hole in the ground. And so they explode things. They
Oh, wow.
dynamite or whatever they use. And so we get almost all the pictures go off frame, off level on a regular basis.
How
So
you
I'm gonna
did?
fix that one.
Niels, Happy New Year. Good to see you.
So back in Feuertips, sorry about the delay in between the last one and this one. Good to be back. So we're going to do I'm basically going to start off the year by just showing you some refactoring I did of some code and get your feedback on the refactoring, Michelle, and of course our listeners. But before we do that, I'd also like to announce that this is the last live Feuertips I'm going to do. From now on, all the Feuertips that you see will be actually generated by artificial means. So my words will be generated by Chat GPT. The image will be generated by, I don't know, Valley. I think it's now, there's a new one called VALLE.
I think is it Vali or Dali?
Oh, Dahlia, there's still lives, I think.
Okay.
Volley are videos, generated videos. So any video you see me going forward is not the real me. Just want you, no matter what I say, it's not the real me.
How do we know that this is the real you today? We don't. Nobody knows. Oh, that crooked picture in the background kind of.
Yeah. The non-real me would never allow that to be crooked or something. But the fact is,
I take it you're not a fan of these AI tools. I'm a bit of a fan. I used it this weekend to help me solve a problem in my life, generating meal plans for my family. But I get that you're not a fan.
You know, it's like every piece of technology out there, right? It does some good. Facebook does some good, I suppose. But I don't know when we'll learn, like, where do you draw a line? So one of the things I want to point you folks to is to a website called infiniteconversation.com. I'm not going to play it while we're here. You can just go check it out. We're rapidly approaching the point. Really, we've reached the point now where anything you see online cannot be trusted. It could be a deep fake video, deep fake voice, deep fake conversation. We literally have no way of discerning these things anymore. To me, that should be like the primary concern, not can I save a few minutes of coding time by generating a PL/SQL block from Chat GPT and then debugging it. But you know, humans, we don't draw lines. We never say enough is enough. We say if we can do it, let's do it. And yeah, we now know that just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, as our planet falls apart around us. Okay, that's the end of my rant. Check it out. But no, the end of my rant is, seriously, just spend the least amount of time you can in front of a screen. Spend the most amount of time you can outdoors. And that's the best way that you can live your life. It's really simple, I say. So as soon as we're done here, out I go with the dogs. Another one at my feet.
Oh, cool.
Meantime, let's do some PL/SQL. So Mark, could you share my screen? I'm going to move this guy out of the way. I don't even
have you played with any of the so obviously you've mentioned and you know that with Chat GPT and some of the models you can get it to actually review your code. Have you, and I know you're going to be commenting on Adrian's recent blog post in that space, but have you tried it, like evaluated Chat GPT's ability to review and comment?
I think I went to the site this weekend after I talked to Adrian. Adrian did this. He got some feedback from Chat GPT and published a blog post about it. I'm going to publish a response to that blog post because the advice was interesting. The advice sounded like a lot of what I've seen people reviewing Chat GPT content to be, which is wow, it sounded so reasonable, and yet most of it was nonsense.
Okay, all right. I think it'd be really cool to do, like, we should do that, maybe a live kind of code review, compare, well, what's Chat GPT saying about this block of code versus Stephen Feuerstein.
You know, it's so funny because I don't quite understand what the drivers are for all of that. I mean, we have humans who can talk to other humans, work with other humans to write code and analyze code and give feedback. Why do we want computers to replace that? Why do we want, I mean, so far the promise of automating jobs so that the people who don't no longer have to do those boring jobs live good lives, clearly Totally not the case. All the automation is all about maximizing profits for the owners of companies. So I just don't get, as a developer, I'm like anti-excited about it, because the lessons that we should have learned is there will be nothing good for humans in this. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the past year, actually, I've been working on a project on an application here at Insum called InTrack. All of our internal apps are in something. So InTrack is basically project tracking. And it's a tool we've been building for our project teams to be able to build, basically be more successful with their applications. We've integrated code reviewing, a whole lot of things into it. And so, of course, we also built some PL/SQL code. And I ran into a situation when we needed to do some enhancements, extend some existing code. When I looked at the code, I thought to myself, really? Do we really want to do it this way and keep going? Or do we want to take a different approach? So I want to talk about that a bit. As I'm sure anybody who's listened to me over the years knows, one of the things I really hate is repeating the same code over and over again. And what I noticed when I looked in this application, so just briefly, we have, for example, am I a member of the InTrack team? So the team that builds the InTrack application has some special roles inside Insum. So I pass in the person ID. I've got the list of team members for a given project, and then the information for that person. So I do a join for that person ID, a join to the team members. For this specific project, I have a constant with the name hard-coded. And then I find out how many of me are on that team. And if there is one, I return yes, then no. And you could say any number of things at this point. Hopefully you would look at this and say, Stephen, count star? Why would you do a count star when the most you could have is one? And shouldn't you just do a select into, raise no data found? Possibly. But here's what I want to focus on today more. So there's that from team project person. Get me all the InTrack team members and return them as a nested table. This is a pipelined table function. And look, same pattern, same three tables. Here's the project. And then I'm passing back more information because I'm passing back an object type, a list of object types, an array of object types. Also, I have a parameter saying, do I want to get all the members or just the team leads? So if it's not all the members, then is it a tech lead? Is it a project owner? And then we've got get me the names. So the same three tables, the same where clause, list tag of the names. And then we've got this other special project called Project Success, which is designed to help bring our junior developers up to speed and out in the world of billing as quickly as possible. And wow, look, it's the same stuff. Copy, pasted. Oh, Stephen, I'm so disappointed in you. Okay, so we had this situation where there's lots of duplication of same or similar queries. You can see here, this is a bit different. Now we've got the team member roles because I want to know if it's a team lead. So now I do all those equid joins, and I also go to the team member role table, and I look to see if the name is one of the tech lead or team lead names. And I wanted to figure out how to consolidate this, have to have one source of the data that I could use. And really, I started with this one up here. So this is the relatively simplest version, right? Just, is this person a member of a team? And I decided, well, rather than have the same query over and over again, how could I share that query and just execute the query without writing it multiple times? One idea is to use a view. The other idea is to use an explicit cursor, which is the approach I took. So let's go up to the top of this one.
My mind would have immediately gone to view.
And the view makes some sense. And really, essentially, this is a view, right? Mm-hmm. I've created a cursor. It's really a function. You think of a cursor as being a function, right? A select statement really is a kind of function. You pass in your bind values, your parameters, which are literally parameters in a cursor, and you return data, right? Logically speaking, select statements and functions, the same thing. So whether or not it should be a view or not might depend on whether or not you want to access the same kind of data outside of the package. But in any case, we kept it inside with an explicit cursor. And as you can see, it's gotten a lot more complicated. So what happened is that as I went through the different requirements, first I just grabbed this and I made it an explicit cursor. Literally, I just grabbed it, put it up at the top, and then I would replace this with open cursor, etc. And I'll show you that in a moment. But as I went through more of the code, we found different requirements. For example, this doesn't have the team member role in it. What if I want to look to see if a specific role is on that team or who has that role in the team? So we essentially what we ended up doing was going back up to the cursor in multiple passes and extending it with more parameters and putting in some flexibility. And this is something where I'm sure some of my attendees will have some feedback. But so for example, what I say is, find me all the members of this project. So that's required. If I pass a person ID, I want to know if that person is in the team. Does it return a row? So either the person matches or the person ID is null. I hate how that formatting happens. And then team member roles. So I want to know for this project, if this person is the tech lead, is the project owner, is a developer. So either I pass in null, which means I don't filter on that, or I have a select that takes the in string of those roles, timer name, or the internal team member role name greater than 0, right? So I basically do an in string to see if that comma delimited list has this name in it. So basically I started going through these different programs, finding the same or similar queries and then replacing them. So let's take a look at how this turned into the code, what it did to the code. So let's go and open. So here I am, project success team member. Let's find that one here. It's actually Interact team member. We renamed it along the way, right? So here's what I had before, and now here's what I've got. So open the cursor for this project and this person. Fetch the row back, close. Now, do I have a person or not? Am I on the team or not? So if the person ID is not null, return yes, else return no. So I'd love to get your thoughts, those of you who are watching, about the differences between these, right? So I started out with this, I ended up with this. And you might say, hopefully you are saying to yourself, that is a lot more code. And there are a couple of other things you could say about it I'll come back to. So clearly going from this to this is not a big win, right? It's a lot of extra code. The difference though is that I can now build on it. So if I look for this one, notice I've got 6 iterations of open team member cursor. So now, am I a team lead? Is this person a team lead? So open the team member cursor for that role. Or actually it's a comma delimited list of roles. If we look at the package spec. So I've got constants for all of my different roles, and I put together comma delimited lists of specific groupings of roles. Obviously, there are, in a different kind of environment, we might actually create a separate table of roles and groupings of roles. We don't need that level of complexity here. So then, it's the same pattern: open, fetch, close, return. And we can keep going. And now, so get me all the project success team members. So if we go back to the team members, now I've got a for loop. If it's the tech lead or the project owner, then included, otherwise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now I say, just get me all the team members for project success, and then pipe out the rows. Team leads, same kind of code. Get me all the team members for those member roles, and pipe them back out. So just over and over again, I can build on top of what I had before. Get me the team junior devs. So here's all that same code, juniors. Pipe it back out. Even list tags. So I had a list tag. If I go to look at the list tag here, here's my list tag. Here's my 3-way join, et cetera, et cetera. So now it's simply using one of those pre-existing table functions and do a list tag against the values returned by the table function. So in this case, it actually did simplify matters. Same thing here, right? I just simply call a different variation of that table function, of that, essentially that query. Do we have any questions or comments so far?
No, none. No new ones in the chat.
Okay. So I'll just keep going. So I don't know about any of you, but I was looking at all these things and thinking, seriously, all of this repeated over and over again? Look at that. It's the same code, the same pattern of code. What's different? Team name. So let's look at the final iteration. So junior devs. Let's look in the package body, not the spec. So in my next iteration, my next turn, junior devs simply became, get me the team members for this role. So I'm no longer repeating all of this code over and over again, right? So this one, get me the team members for a specific set of roles. Now I simply say, get me the team leads, get me the juniors. So I was able to shrink down a lot of this code. This is a lot of code. This is bulky looking. Mm-hmm. But once that's done, I now have this basically tool set that I can use to build on top of it. One thing I did notice though, so you can see that this one is built on the other. In the previous iteration, notice these are pipeline table functions. So it turns out that when I change to this approach of having one function calling the other, so here's my base function, here's my function built on top of that one, I can no longer do pipelining. I had to change it to a regular table function without pipelining where I populate the collection and return it. Can anybody think of why that's the case? Why couldn't I have one pipeline table function call another pipeline table function? Anybody remember what some of the specific constraints are for pipeline table functions?
I feel like Niels or Judith would know the answer to this question.
I'm pretty sure they would.
They're just past experience. They're thinking about it.
Okay, so one of the key differences between a nested table function and a pipeline table function is that a pipeline table function can only be executed from inside a query because you're pipelining the data back. It has to be picked up by that query. It can't be called by another PL/SQL function, as Nils just typed in, I believe. So once I moved away, once I wanted to get rid of all this duplication of logic and have just one body of code that others would call, I can no longer pipeline it. So this one couldn't be pipelined right here because that's the inner version. I suppose that I could have made these pipelined, but I'd have to call this, return it into a collection, then iterate through the collection and pipeline it out. Wouldn't make any sense. Pipelining was not important for me in this application. I don't need to be concerned about the performance implications of a nested table versus pipelined or the reduced memory consumption. So it was okay to remove it, to move away from the pipelining to non-pipelining. But I was, at first it took me a moment to realize, oh, right, that's why I can't do that. So I thought this was a really interesting use of explicit cursors, right? So generally speaking, people avoid explicit cursors and just do select intos. One of the advantages of an explicit cursor is that it's a named object. And because it's a named object, I can reference it in multiple places. I can essentially reuse it. Where if I'm doing a select into, I'm pretty much stuck with copy paste. Any other questions or comments there to look at? Looks like not. Okay, let's take a look at.
I think Mark just put up an earlier comment from Judith.
There are probably small setup tables who just look at the amount of code, but in many cases, simplifying code by adding one of those OR conditions might make the optimizer, in fact, might make the optimizer less happy. So let's look at that right now. So what I had here was person ID equals the person ID passed in, or the person ID passed in is null. Same thing here. If I pass in the role names, if I don't pass in a restricted filter of role names, if it's null, then fine, do that, don't do this. Now, I'm thinking that the optimizer doesn't have problems with this, but I'm not a pro at the optimizer. I'm pretty sure from my recollection of when Chris Saxon worked for me, and I can ask him to look at my SQL, he would say that this could cause a problem if the column, if you say if column value is null or something else. This could be a problem in terms of using the index. But I would think if you're looking at a constant, right, this is a bind variable, I would think the optimizer would check first and say, yeah, it's null, and not worry about the rest of it, not worry about all of this. But that may not be accurate. I'm not the pro at that. So that was one question I came up with. Actually, I did a code review of the same code with one of my in some consultants this morning. And so the kind of things that he raised a question about were this. So one was, he thought that rather than even writing code like this, in other words, using an or clause, he would do something like this. If person ID equals, case when the bind variable is null, then the person ID, so 1 equals 1, or use the value that's coming in. And again, I don't know if that's advantageous from an optimizer standpoint or not. Like person ID equals person ID, whether or not the optimizer will say that's the same as 1 equals 1, do not know. What I'd like to think is that the optimizer will look at all these variations and treat them roughly the same, but I know that's not always the case. Again, in my context, the performance is not critical, and you could always make the argument that no matter what application you're working in, no matter how much data you're working with, you should always write the most optimized code for like the worst case scenario, but I'm not sure that makes sense. I'm not sure that putting the extra effort into avoiding every potential worst case scenario is justified when you're building an application. Another thing that Federico...
Until you're doing things like, and was it Anton on Instant Tips was doing something, and he was, it's very different when you design an app in one environment versus designing it to work, for example, on apex.oracle.com, right? Where you've got hundreds of thousands of workspace and apps. And so I guess if you know already that your app is going to live in an environment and have that kind of pressure on it, then you definitely need to be thinking about it early on, right?
Very smart. Yeah, for sure. Right. And being able to test in those variety of environments, right? This is an internal application, so it's not a concern in terms of performance. Mm-hmm. The only concern would be that the people building these applications here at InSum are people like Anton and myself, plus the juniors. And of course, we want to be teaching the juniors of the best way to do things.
Right.
So at least we can make them aware of this and see how it goes. The other thing that Federico mentioned is that, so what I'm doing here, it's pretty lazy, I admit it. If you pass in a list, a comma delimited list of team members, right? So here's this. And I created, I've got all these named constants, and then I produce these comma delimited lists. So what I'm doing is something rather crude. I'm saying basically do an int string. So take that list, comma delimited list, put a comma in front and behind, and then take the name of the person from the team, take the name of the role from the team member role table, put a comma before and after it. So we make sure there's no problems with things being smushed together, and see if it's in there. If it's in there, that means it's one of the roles we're looking for or not. If not, then it's not. And he suggested very appropriately, I thought, to use apex split, apex string.split, I believe. So you can basically, instead of doing an int string, you could say where, let's see, tmr2.name is in, select column value from apex string.
While you're typing that in, Stephen, it looks like Amin has been doing some refactoring of his own and has replaced 4 separate procedures with 1 procedure using parameters. Awesome.
What a great feeling, right? I mean, refactoring like that and getting rid of code, it's one of the joys of programming, I think. Almost as much fun as building out the initial solution, I guess. And then you get into the issue of, the trade-offs as you're doing that. So here's Judith, you can use colname equals NVL. Huh. So as long as you're not doing an NVL on colname, okay. But there's something else coming, I'm sure.
Here it is.
Not for decode and probably not also case. Interesting. So you're saying, Judith, that as far as you know, the optimizer is NVL aware, but not generally aware, like going inside case expressions and decodes. I was hoping it would do better with case than with decode, but maybe not. So again, these are the kinds of issues you have to address and be very aware of if you're writing applications to be used by thousands of users, gigabytes of, not gigabytes, but petabytes of data and so on. But sometimes you don't have to. Nils, why not use a collection for team member role names right from the start? So I think what you're saying is instead of having a comma delimited list, like I have here, why not actually populate so basically have a my team NT I believe you're saying that, Nil. So why not actually just create a collection and then query against it? Well, aren't you clever, Nils? That sounds like a great idea. Let's see. Team lead names. I'd have to pass it as a parameter. Okay, so there's an example. So I would just basically change this to be a nested table. I have to say, I've never created a cursor that has as one of its parameter a nested table, but I'm going to try that out, Nils. That sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
Report back on the next Feuertips.
Sure. I'll do that. All right, so it's 11:26. So keep putting out your thoughts if you have them as we go, but I think it's a good time to wrap up. Hopefully that was enjoyable to you. Like I said, I had a good time going through the process of refactoring, especially when I'm working with the junior devs on our project, and they're learning and also giving feedback. And hopefully all of you are able to take the time to do that with your developers. So here at InSum, we take peer code reviews really seriously. They're actually a part of our agreements with our customers that we will do this to ensure high code quality, which is why we built our own internal app to manage code reviews and also extract lessons learned from those code reviews that we can share with all our developers. So hopefully you've got a similar process in place and you used Apex to build a code review app. Why not? It's so many things. Okay, so I don't see any more comments. So I think we're good there. I already did my ranting about stay away from computers and
Not
so.
like a must do on Feuertips, I guess so. An unofficial check.
Check
Rant
about my
done.
ranting. I don't have any favorite cultural artifacts to offer right now. Basically these days, my cultural artifact is avoid human culture, and get out into the world. So that would be my continuing advice on that side of things. Michelle, do you have anything you want to add or throw in or offer up?
No, hey, I can take a minute and show my Chat GPT app that
That's it.
actually, if my share thing works. This to me is the positive part of tools like this. Okay, wait, share screen. Let's see if this is going to work. I'm going to try and share a window here. So not to bore you with the details. Can you see yeah, you can see my screen. Okay. So here's something I struggle with every week when I'm trying to plan my meals for my busy family. I have my daughter who's vegetarian. I think slowly inching towards vegan, but for now, vegetarian. My husband, he's put on a few pounds over the holidays. He's doing keto. I tend to be on the low iron, anemic side. So I'm looking for things that are high in iron and vitamin C. My son hates eggplants. So every week I'm trying to think of a combination of recipe ideas, meal plans that's going to satisfy all of this. So I said, hey, maybe I can build an Apex app on top of Chat GPT to help me with that. So here we go. Here's the result. So in our specific case, we're vegetarian. We want meal plans that are vegetarian, keto. You could put in.
Those are ands, not ors.
They are ends, correct.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to be interested in iron and vitamin C as micronutrients to include. There's different prompts. So the whole idea here is using Apex to build up the prompt that you send to Chat GPT. So I can choose to include nutritional information if I want, recipe directions. I want you to okay, we can certainly do that. I have all sorts of ideas of what we could add on to this. I've got a limited number of credits here. I was playing with a 7-day meal plan, but I'm like, I'm gonna run out of free credits here, so I can go up to 3 days for meal plan. We're gonna ignore this, but this is where you can put in any other custom prompts that you want to the AI. Get my plan. And it's going to go away, call Chat GPT.
After Microsoft invests another $10 billion, it'll be faster.
Possibly. And maybe we broke Chat GPT. Here we go.
Well, that's right.
I should have put simpler prompts in.
The one time I went to the site to look at it, it said it was busy and unavailable. So maybe
Chat GPT, right? Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. All right. So here's my meal plan. And because I
Couldn't you
asked for
have typed that
nutrition,
yourself faster?
sorry?
Couldn't you have typed that yourself faster? Just kidding.
No, come on. This is awesome. I'm going to use it.
Is it awesome or is it nonsense?
Well, we can have a separate debate on that. We'll have to.
No, I mean, how do you know it's not nonsense? Like everything that Chat GPT offers up seems to be composed of a good mix of nonsense and sense.
Well, so I'm using, this is a pretty safe space for me. I'm not asking it any,
Look, it says arsenic right there.
it does not. All right, I'm done. I thought this would be a fun thing to share, but obviously.
No, it's great. And so was it a REST API out to
Yeah,
Chat
yeah.
GPT?
Oh, so there's a REST API that you can use to call.
I mean, one of the things I like about that is a reminder of how open Apex has become. It used to be kind of a closed world, and now pretty much anything out there
Yep.
is available for use or access within Apex as long as they built the REST API. So that's really great. No, I'm really impressed that you did that, Michelle. I'm sorry. But do
We can have a separate debate on it. Oh, Amin, download it. I've you know what? After the show, I'll put in a link in the comments to the post, and maybe I can update it to include an actual downloadable version. It's super, I think it's a cool application, but the app itself is super simple. No rocket science. But in my blog post, you've got the code that you need. But I'll put a download link in there, and so check back to the video afterwards, and I'll update the description. So we've gone over 30 minutes, Stephen. Sorry about that.
Thanks for sharing that. No, that was really interesting. And all right, folks, hopefully you enjoyed my refactoring session. See you in a few weeks or something like that. And I hope you have a great 2023.
Yes. Stay healthy, everyone.
Stay
Bye.
healthy. Bye.